and paramount values and virtues. We saw the suspension of Parliament, the lack of debate. MPs, when they were whipped within a couple of minutes to force them to do things. We saw a barrage of fear and nudge telling us this is the science when actually it was policy. We also saw a hysteria in some parts of the media and the so-called opposition who wanted longer, harder, faster, and were tub-thumping and championing for more. The reasonable, rational, calm debate was suspended. People were accused of being mad or dangerous or willing to kill granny. And I think that this gives pause to say that we did have a pandemic preparedness strategy. It was jettisoned. There was a hysterical response. When we remember back, actually, the government at the start did take a bit of a different approach. But they were lacking in a backbone, I think, and principle, ended up kowtowing to this sense of hysteria and actually then driving and promoting it with the Behavioural Insights Unit and pushing the public. Now, I would say that this should demonstrate that we should never, ever allow again a situation where anything like this happens. But I do have a concern here, and that together we've been consistently arguing for calm and for a reasonable response and weighing up risks and benefits, cost-benefit analysis. But my concern is that there is a big discussion about the World Health Organization and its pandemic ideas for the future. And you also noted earlier in your show that other parts of Europe and internationally, they're even more draconian. So we're not talking about this in an isolated context or a silo where we saw many even worse restrictions on people. So we need to be very resolute that the public should be front and centre in the heart of this, that this so-called inquiry, which might take between 5 and 10 years, is not acceptable. They keep pushing back dates. And that we make clear that things like the Public Health Act that was used, not the Coronavirus Emergency Act, but the Public Health Act that was used to implement lockdown, should never have a lockdown again, ever, under any circumstances. And that we weigh up and we do a cost-benefit analysis, and we always have parliamentary scrutiny, and we never allow a situation again where the police are used in this way. We should remind ourselves that the opposition, the so-called opposition, were pushing even further for all of this as well. And so we have found ourselves in a situation where this hysterical moment of imposition and draconian measures happened. And it's a terrible situation. But the only thing I would say, David, about it all is that we're now organised. At Together Declaration, we have hundreds of thousands of people around the country. Where there is a bit of a continuity with all of this is in the approach of the idea that you can keep just putting impositions and restrictions and measures on people. And we're seeing similar things to what we saw partially in the lockdowns, in a discussion around how people should move or not move around their cities, people being sort of not allowed to freely be mobile with 15-minute neighbourhoods and low-traffic neighbourhoods, using very similar notions of fear and imposition. And I think that we do well to remind ourselves that the best tonic and the best antidote to these anti-freedom impositions is that the public gets to have its voice and our concerns are front and centre.
I mean, I think you make some very good points there. This was cross-party. Well, actually, it wasn't. It was the Conservative Party and it was Labour. And as you rightly say, Labour actually wanted harder, faster, deeper lockdowns. So certainly the Labour Party cannot be blameless in this.
Absolutely right. In fact, Keir Starmer kept making that point that, and if we remember, it was a horrible period because our fellow citizens, there was this sense in which people were being accused because they had been basically terrified. They'd been told that if they do certain things, if they go for a walk in the park twice, not once, if they go and they walk with their 2 or 3 friends, not just meet one person for a coffee, that this would be the most irresponsible act conceivable. And I wonder where so many, as it happens, Talk TV were fantastic, and but I wonder where these journalists, where we remember the daily press conferences, it's difficult in some ways, we just want to forget all of that, but where were the questions, where were the penetrating investigative questions from the media as well? It seemed like so many people have been caught up with this, and I think it was an abdication of responsibility.
And actually, we were one of the only outlets pushing for the truth. Other mainstream media were there kowtowing to the government line. They didn't once criticise it. They took it as rote. And people like me who pushed back on this from the very beginning, and there are many of my colleagues too who are medical doctors, are now, under the Freedom of Information request, have found the government was snooping on people who were basically saying your policy is wrong.
Absolutely. So not only do we have 118,000 tickets issued to citizens and had people followed by drones and really draconian measures by the police, but as you say, many of our doctors and a few journalists and people that were campaigners and organisers and other citizens had spy units checking them out, following them, pursuing them. It is absolutely reprehensible. The idea of we should always now be very concerned and critical when we hear that we want to keep you safe. This was all in the spirit of keeping us safe and saving the NHS. The NHS, that's role is there to ensure that we are treated. And we have these kind of really Stasi-like terms that we use that we perpetuated time after time. And the one thing that we should take from this is that a critical discourse in the public arena is absolutely essential. That's why freedom of speech is so important, and we see the attacks with things like the Online Safety Bill, why the Public Order Act, Act, and now the Policing Bill, which is proposing that you have all sorts of protest orders that stop people going or monitor them. It's all very Black Mirror, and we should remind ourselves that these measures, we've already got enough laws to deal with things as they have, and people understandably are concerned about some types of protests. But we should remember the screechings and the howls when citizens wanted to say that, you know, these measures that we'd never seen before, the lockdowns that were unprecedented, when people were challenging them, people who'd never been involved in politics before, people were howling at them that they were super spreaders, they were irresponsible. But this whole climate was created by an irresponsible political elite, both by the government at the time and by Labour. I would say one other thing, David, though, within all of this. If Boris and the government at the time were to have gone, should have gone, I think it should have been on the basis of these things that happened, right? On the basis of we should not have had lockdowns in this way. We should not have had these punitive, pernicious measures done to the citizens and the public, not because of some cake and wine. Now, I do get the point that people are furious about it, but what it demonstrated was that they knew that this wasn't necessary. And that's the point. And so we've now got a situation where there's some people who are unelected, and we've got even more technocratic impulse in our current government. And actually it's got further away from the public. And I think that we really, quite rightly, I mean, Isabel Oakeshott has done a really important thing here, and the Telegraph, they've committed a lot of resource to fact-checking and dedication to this. This is something that is very important for the country. And as you say, on Talk, you're one of the few people to have been challenging this. But we need to have a proper assessment and evaluation and say, not again. The other thing about all of this is that we should note that as well in our care homes and our schools, our most vulnerable, the way that the cavalier way and the nasty, terrible way, the isolation of people, the treatment of families, they only come in authoritative societies. There's all sorts of other things as well, like we know, like Midazolam and do not resuscitate measures and all sorts of things that Matt Hancock was involved in. These are questions that need to be addressed, as well as we've got to say there are a whole range of questions with this huge rollout as well. And I just think that this is a time now for us to be very clear that we have to stand together, insist on our fundamental rights of privacy, autonomy and choice, because we also saw an unnecessary and damaging vaccine mandate being imposed where we lost over 40,000 care workers. And now we know the care sector is in an absolute crisis, partly because of all of that.
I mean, it strikes me liberty is very hard fought and very easily lost. Let me tell you, when I was approached by Test and Trace, they banged on my door. They checked where I was every single day. It was like living in a Nazi state. It was just totally unacceptable. We don't deserve to live in a country like that. What I find even more unforgivable is the way we treated elderly people. We left people to die alone and frightened without being able to see their relatives. For what? For nothing.
Absolutely. The way that this was all presented and perpetuated with hype, fear, obfuscation and lies now, we see clearly, treated in this jocular fashion is abhorrent. It's a scandal nationally. It's an international scandal as well, because many other nations did things and some were much worse. But now's the important time. That's why Together Association, we're saying people should get involved in making sure that we uphold our freedoms and our rights together. We do not allow that these measures where they get encroached with the next thing that people suddenly decide will be the thing they want to use, whether it's about within our cities at the moment, 15-minute neighborhoods, low traffic neighborhoods, or anything else, that people get involved, togetherdeclaration.org, and have their voices heard. Locally, regionally, and nationally, we've got ambassadors. We're saying that we need to maintain and uphold our rights, whether it's about freedom of protest, freedom of speech, or just moving around our cities. And don't allow this attempt to promulgate fear to prevent discussion and debate, and that we say we have to make sure that in Britain we don't see anything like this ever again.
Alan, well said. Alan Miller, co-founder of the Together Declaration. So many messages coming in, Carolyn. Says absolutely he loved power. It was
Jesus Christ.